Hello, in this video I'm going to be looking at a crucial military encounter in the history of Crusades, and that is the encounter between the Fatimid Empire of Egypt and initially the armies of the First Crusade, subsequently the armies of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. And these were a series of military campaigns that took place between 1099 and 1123. And essentially what the Fatimids tried to achieve was to defeat the Kingdom of Jerusalem in its early years by marching out of Egypt, crossing the Sinai Desert, and then up north towards Jerusalem. But crucially, the Fatimid army was not successful on many occasions. And so today we're going to be thinking about why that was. And we're going to start off by looking at the different types of armies deployed by these various different peoples. So let's start with the Fatimid Empire. The Fatimid Empire had a very distinctive form of army because it put together its army from a wide range of different contingents. It recruited Armenian soldiers who fought as archers or as cavalry. It recruited Berber or Bedouin light cavalry, Sudanese infantry, or Turkish mounted archers. And there were others too, but the army was basically a collection of these various different contingents. And this had a number of strengths. It meant the Fatimids could deploy various different forms of army, which covered various different forms of warfare: mounted archers, heavy cavalry, infantry, whereas many other peoples could only deploy armies of a specific type. This gave the Fatimids an advantage, and they could afford armies like this because the Fatimids, by ruling the Nile Delta and its enormous agricultural wealth, as well as controlling the trade routes that passed through Egypt, could afford very large armies with multiple contingents. And so Fatimid armies have been estimated between, say, 15 to 20,000 troops strong. And the Fatimids could be very effective in war. And so, for example, in the year 982, a Fatimid army was borne by ship to southern Italy, where it then scored a major victory over the armies of the German Empire. Or indeed in 1077, when the Seljuk Turks invaded Egypt, only to be defeated by the Fatimid armies in the Nile Delta. And the various contingents of the Fatimid army were also well known for their military prowess. So all of this helps to provide context on the Fatimid armies, but it doesn't bring us much closer to explaining why the Franks were able to defeat them repeatedly in the years from 1099 to 1123. So let's look at the Frankish armies of this period. Now, the first battle against the Fatimid Empire took place at a place called Ascalon in 1099. And on this occasion, the Fatimids were fighting what was left of the First Crusade. Subsequently, the Fatimids were fighting the armies of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. And in these early years, although the Kingdom of Jerusalem's army grew larger over time, the kingdom only had very small forces comprised of a few hundred cavalry and then a slightly larger formation of infantry. So, what happened, and why were the Franks able to defeat the Fatimids in battle on many occasions? And there's various answers to that. To begin, looking at the first major battle between the Fatimids and the First Crusade outside Ascalon, what the Franks did on that occasion was to stage an advance in the early hours of the morning and then at daybreak to charge directly into the Fatimids' encampment. And the objective here was to try and offset the fact that the Fatimids probably did have an advantage in numbers by staging a surprise charge directly into the Fatimid encampment, the idea being to try and stampede their opponents into a rout. And the Franks augmented their cavalry forces that staged this charge by bringing together herds of cattle who they then forced to charge in front of them, which would then amplify the effect of their cavalry shock troops. In later years, it seems as if the Kingdom of Jerusalem tried very similar things, trying to charge directly into the Fatimid encampment or charge the Fatimid army before it could be fully formed. But there are other explanations here too. Another approach that seems to have been adopted is for Frankish knights, when they started this charge, to try and specifically target the Fatimids' key leaders. The idea being that if you either capture them or kill them, then their army will then lose cohesion and fall apart. That may also have been a strategy they employed, but you can see all the time the Franks are trying to work out how to defeat a much larger army with their very limited forces. Other explanations that have been offered by historians over the years include the suggestion that maybe the various contingents in the Fatimid army had mutual rivalries, and that those rivalries then brought about a loss of cohesion in the Fatimid army that the Franks could then exploit. Whether that's the case, it's difficult to say. There are some reports of rivalries between different contingents. Whether they were instrumental in bringing about the defeat of the Fatimid army is harder to say. But these do seem to be the key factors which led ultimately to the Frankish victories of this era. And you can see that there's a great deal of focus placed on trying to make the Frankish heavy cavalry charge count and to defeat the Fatimids at the first charge, because the Franks know that ultimately over time the weight of numbers will tell against them, so they have to win these battles quickly. Okay, well, I do hope you found this presentation interesting. Please do look at the other presentations in this collection.